Yeah, I have just come back from a really wonderful summer school that has been taking place for, I don't know, between 10 to 15 years. Um, and it is a summer school that takes place in southern Spain, in the province of Andalusia. And if folks know a bit about the history of the Iberian Peninsula, you might have encountered that, a civilization that once had the name Al-Andalus has often been described by many scholars as kind of the pinnacle of convivencia, or a type of, let's say, multi-faith, multiracial civilization with relative coexistence and co-tolerance, you know. And yeah, the summer school deals with liberation theology and decolonization in Islam. And I first went there as a student over 10 years ago. I started to go as an organizer a couple years after that, and now I lecture there. So it's been a long full circle, and this year went very, very well. Thanks be to God.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Iskander. And also, we're joined by June Wink. Welcome, June. And Ariel Gold, our executive director, is here. Would either of you like to share any words before Iskander gets started?
I'll just thank everybody for joining, especially June for joining. It's so nice to see you, June and Iskander and Susan. And I'll say that FOR is really proud to be having this program, both to honor and continue and raise up the work of Walter Wink, one of our most prominent and beloved members, and as well to open conversation and teach folks about Islamic liberation theology. And we hope to continue, and we will look for next avenues to continue both the study of Walter Wink and his work, and really diving deeply into Islamic liberation theology. So with that, I'll see if June has anything to say, and otherwise pass the floor to our program.
June, would you like to share anything or wait till the end of the program? Oh, you're muted.
That's my fault. I was muting people as they entered. So we need to get June to unmute. June, right over on the left side where it says audio, and I should have sent you a request to unmute.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yes, that's it.
Oh, okay, I'm on. I'm just very eager to see what Iskander has have to say, having been with a bunch of women this morning, which were all in grief, and there seems to be no answer except love, 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 and we need to know, what does that mean? And we want that to be explored from all angles of religions and different ways of approaching how we should love our enemy. So I'm eager to hear, and everyone else who's on the program. And hopefully I can see you all.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, June. Before passing it to Iskander, I do just want to give a quick shout out to a new National Council member, Sister Claire Carter, who's joined us. I don't know if you're joining by phone, Sister Claire Carter, but Sister Claire is with the Buddhist order. She's with the New England Peace Pagoda, which is part of the Nipponzan Myohoji order, which is all over the world, Asia, Europe, Washington, D.C., Massachusetts, and we're so honored to have Sister Claire's wisdom and guidance at this time. And I see Iskander has his hands in a Buddhist position, so
That's a
maybe that was just a
Namaste.
Thank you, Iskander. Please take it away.
Sure, okay. Well, welcome back, everyone, and thank you again to the Fellowship of Reconciliation, June and Walter Wink, for the opportunity to work through the powers that be. This is, of course, our last session. There are, I believe, 4 chapters that we are going to attempt to cover today. And the way I would like to go about things today will be a bit different than our previous sessions. I will not be providing slides today. And I don't know if it's serendipitous or just some kind of synchronicity, but I really appreciate June coming into this space with grief because I show up with that today as well. There's a lot of death around us. There's a lot of death, there's a lot of dying. And I, and maybe many of you, are feeling that, alongside many other things. I feel that we are in a time of deep paradox, of kind of very high levels of resistance to the powers that be, but also very high levels of oppression from the powers that be. And it hurts. It hurts on a lot of different levels. So the first thing I want to start with today, I'm not sure, I may have shared uh, this with you in a previous session. I cannot remember, but I would like to start with some recitation of the Quran, which is the sacred text in Islam. And I would specifically like to share with you a chapter known as the chapter Yasin. That's the name of the chapter, Yasin. It's 2 letters, the letter Ya and the letter Sin. It's the equivalent of Y and S. Okay. A few of the chapters of the Quran are actually named in this kind of mysterious way, and people have different theories as to why. But Surah Yasin is um, it's a very important chapter in the Quran. Um, it's known as the heart of the Quran, and most Muslims will know it in a very personal, intimate way because it is the chapter that you recite at funerals or when people are dying on their deathbed. Um, it's often recited at other times, um, and it has many different kind of themes that come out. There are themes around the prophets and the lives that they lived and the struggles that they faced. There are themes around, the end of times, and there are themes around, a number of different things. So I'd like to first start with sharing this chapter of the Quran for about 10 minutes to kind of settle ourselves and step into the sadness and the grief of our times. Uh, what I'm learning in my young life, I'm sure you all know much better than me, is that there's no way to get through it except through it. So I would like to start with that, and then we can jump to a relatively open form of working through chapters 8 through the epilogue. So I'm going to start with sharing Surah Yasin. You're going to see a YouTube video. The audio will be on. I will just ask to confirm that you can hear it. You'll also be able to see the direct translation from Arabic to English in the video on your screen. Encounter it as you need to. Gosh. Okay, so I believe I have shared this to your screen. Can folks see it? Yeah? Okay, I'm gonna start it, and after I start it, please just, I can see June and Susan right now. Just give me a thumbs up, letting me know that you can hear it. Okay?
أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان.
We need your help to save the masjid where over 100 Americans have accepted Islam. This is your
فهم مقمهون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما طيرنا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم.
Never sue the other driver after a car accident. There's a better way to get paid a way bigger check without having to.
أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري مستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون.
Hi, everyone. Is it just me back on the screen with you now? Yeah. May Allah, our Creator, the Most High, have mercy on all those who have passed during these times, on ourselves, on our families, on all the struggles we come to this table with. Amen. Ameen. But what if? Right? Chapter 8. I feel like we can just sit with the names of Walter's chapters. These last 4 chapters, the names for me were just amazing. Oh, but what if chapter 8, chapter 9, the gift of the enemy, chapter 10, prayer and the powers, chapter 11, epilogue. Let's start with chapter 8. But what if? You know, I'm happy to go into kind of some brief summary and thoughts, you know, but I think most of us here, we've been around each other for at least 3 sessions, you know? So I'm also, if folks are open to it, we can just, you know, open it up. How did chapter 8 speak to you? Is there anyone who would like to immediately jump in? No? Okay.
What if?
None of you can see my screen anymore, right? No? Okay, cool. It's just, you know, when people can see your desktop, you feel like naked. So let me share a few notes that I took from chapter 8, and then maybe we can get the conversation started. So what's going on in chapter 8? What if, but what if? What is Walter Wink pointing us towards in exploring that question? So the main thing about this question is Wink exploring how people often respond to nonviolence with worst case scenarios like, what if someone attacks your family? What if you were facing Hitler? And for Wink, these questions reveal a deep fear and skepticism about the effectiveness of nonviolence, and they potentially operate as a way to shut down serious consideration of nonviolence. Walter Wink does not dismiss these questions in this chapter, or I mean, even widely in the work, but I think attempts to engage them seriously. And from what I understood, he argues that abstract hypotheticals, abstract what ifs, though very powerful emotionally, and very real to an extent, do not represent, the majority of real life situations. And he believes that we face many forms of injustice and conflict where nonviolent action is not only possible, but more effective. Um, and he underscores in this chapter this idea that, the imagination shaped by violence, it can be dangerous. So, how he provided earlier in the book this idea of how deeply ingrained the domination system is, making a connection between ancient Mesopotamian mythology and modern American video games. Okay. He critiques the way our cultural imagination is shaped by violent stories, which leaves us unable to even imagine a nonviolent situation. So a part of this is a reclamation of imagination for Wink. And in many ways, this imagination is the primary battleground between the domination system and the path of Jesus. He shares a number of kind of very powerful stories of ordinary people using nonviolent action in oppressive and dangerous contexts, from confronting, tyrannical regimes to armed robbers. And fitting within Wink's broader framework, this shows that nonviolence is not passive, but creative, brave, and often remarkably effective. So, what if? How do we turn the what if into practice? Instead of rejecting these hypothetical what ifs, Wink kind of urges us to train for them, to practice them, to apply them wherever we are, in family life, politics, institutions. And in his context as a Christian, he calls on the church to teach and model a nonviolent engagement model as part of discipleship. This is a part of a formation of the spirit. It's a part of not only our external struggles, but our internal lives. So that change, it requires shaping our inner lives to respond with courage, clarity, and as June shared earlier, love, even under threat. Yeah, so I guess let me throw a few questions out there to maybe get us going on this chapter. Why might it be that we as humans instinctively trust violence to solve our problems? What assumptions, what fears, what stories shape our ethical reflexes? And to maybe, really thinking through Walter, how do we prepare ourselves to respond non-violently before we face crisis situations? The floor is ours, is yours. Okay. You want to jump in, June?
I think it's been practiced in the protests that are going on across this country and maybe in other countries too. that there's much more internal attitude, internal feeling that violence doesn't work. So we're trying a different way. We're trying, maybe we could call it the third way, but maybe it's just their own, what you mentioned, I think, in their own internal education, so to speak, or what they've learned from practicing or knowing what works and not. But I just have been very impressed with so much nonviolence going on in all these protests, which I don't think would have worked years and years ago, but maybe they would have.
Ladorna Pat. I'm reminded of just being faithful in small steps.
Yeah.
I read about what happened in Ukraine when they did those drones. I thought they put the little houses with the drones in it, and I thought that was incredible brilliance. And then I noticed the violence of it, and I caught myself in my thinking. I think one of the ways that we have to choose nonviolence is to notice when our minds go to places that that we've been indoctrinated into. That makes any sense.
Yeah. Randy, would you like to jump in?
I'm just glad to be with you.
Okay.
I'll just listen because I don't know where you are at and what you've got covered so far.
We are just, in a way, starting with chapter 8, which is entitled, But What If? And we just did a brief summary of it and asked some questions to get our conversation going. Sure. There's a hand being raised by Adibisi Shofu. Would you like to jump in?
Yes, thank you. I remember an old expression. I was raised on this expression of the pen is mightier than the sword. And that is the way to go. You don't retaliate with the same violence, but you cause a reaction by your protest, and people will come along with you in that protest to make a difference, to change how things happen. And it has happened because I remember during the civil rights movement, and when people crossed the bridge, Edmund Pettus Bridge, if that had not been broadcast and all the terrifying things that were being done in Montgomery, Alabama, if that hadn't been on the news worldwide, there wouldn't have been a change. And so I agree with Walter Wenck in his statement of, yes, we cannot ignore what if you face Hitler, but we can think through it, and at the same time always remember that we need to act by using the pen or the media, whatever the source is, and to get action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Adebison. If I can possibly call on a very esteemed guest who has joined us, Abuna, Father Fahad Abu Aqil, who is a very well-known Palestinian Christian leader. The floor is yours, Ustad, if you'd like to jump in.
The three things that came to my mind is really after we understand the power of nonviolence, then we discover in the case of Martin Luther King that, you know, the FBI understood that the man is teaching nonviolence, but for Hoover, King was a dangerous man. The same thing when you think about Gandhi, you know, educated in London, practiced in South Africa, going back to India. I mean, he had a dream that the power of nonviolence is going to change, you know, send England back home. In Palestine, I'm thinking about a Palestinian American by the name of Mubarak Awad. He got the teaching of King, he got the teaching of Gandhi, and started going from village to village to see, you know, do some training about the importance of nonviolence. And the Israeli military asked the government to send him back to America, to deport him. And the reason why, because the teaching of nonviolence to the Palestinian was a threat to the security of the state of Israel. I think we need the teaching of nonviolence, and we need the philosophy of, you know, Wink and King and Gandhi and all of the prophets, because really nonviolence in a culture of violence, our American culture is a culture of violence, is a threat to the status quo. Thank you.
شكرا أبونا. بارك الله فيكم.
أهلين.
Yeah. Rosina, did you want to share as well?
Sure. I shared in the chat, but I study schools and communities, so this chapter reminds me of like restorative justice, because oftentimes the violence that's comes from the state, it shows up within communities. So I like how this chapter speaks to restorative justice approaches that that focuses on like identifying harm, stopping harm. It focuses on relationships and healing. So I appreciate that connection there.
One last one, Floyd.
Yes, my name is Reverend Floyd Wicker, and I'm from North Carolina. I probably should be quiet because this is my first time visiting this book club. But I like something that the gentleman, and I'm driving, I apologize, but something the gentleman just said about nonviolence and teaching. So my comment is more of a question, and I guess it probably sounds like a little stupid question, but I'm wondering, is our protest in large more impactful, more transformative when the people are steeped or have a better knowledge of the philosophy of nonviolence? So let me repeat that again. Do you think our protests are more effective in mass when the people are steeped or have some greater knowledge in the philosophy and the science of nonviolence? And I ask that question because I wonder, the No Kings movement and these large protests at large, do we really think that these people are trained in the philosophy and the science of nonviolence? Are we really teaching the philosophy, or are we just gathering people and not being violent?
Mm.
Thank you for listening.
Oh, thank you very much, Reverend. That's a very important question. If I may, I think it's helpful, we're talking about what we're for, and asking very serious questions around what we're for in terms of nonviolence. But chapter 9, I think, deals with, in a way, what we're against and how do we relate to the enemy. So if, we can possibly just segue into chapter 9 and come back to the discussion. I'll just do a brief breakdown, and then we can come back to an open discussion, if that's okay with folks. So chapter 9, another beautiful title, The Gift of the Enemy. So what is Wink focusing on, in this chapter? Number one, enemies as spiritual necessities. Okay, kind of weird to hear, paradoxical. So he opens with this idea in the chapter that we need enemies. And for him, not in the sense of seeking conflict, but because they can reveal parts of ourselves we often deny. And our enemies, often expose those projections. What you might call our shadows, our unacknowledged fears. And in that sense, they're gifts because they force us to confront what is hidden within. In certain ways, Wink is building off of, kind of a psychological approach to this question. If folks are familiar with Jungian psychology, he's interrogating this question of how we project parts of ourselves we dislike or are unaware of onto others, often turning them into the enemy. So this projection can actually blind us to truth, and possibly, allows us to dehumanize, judge, or demonize others without critical self-reflection. So what do we do with this enemy? Wink brings in this concept of, reflecting deeply on Jesus's command to love thy enemy, and argues that it's not a call to simple weakness or passivity, but a type of summons to spiritual courage and transformation. And he believes that loving the enemy does not mean accepting injustice, but it's a refusal to replicate the cycle of hatred, of racism, of sexism, of homophobia. I mean, whatever we want to. So that process fits in with his larger scheme of, unmasking the powers, because loving the enemy exposes the spiritual distortion, which are hiding within the systems of domination. And for Wink, this breaks the illusion that violence or hatred can actually bring healing. Franz Fanon would have a real difficult time with that. Enemies in this way can catalyze clarity, and they force us to name what we stand for and how we will resist evil without becoming it. Wink also emphasizes the need to see the humanity of our enemies, even when we oppose their actions. This is not meant to negate accountability. It's supposed to humanize justice further, and forgiveness along similar lines can become a form of spiritual resistance, freeing us from the bondage to the enemy and the need for vengeance. So, overall for Wink, this means enemy love as spiritual practice. It means increasing our self-awareness and growth, and it means liberation from hatred. And some questions that I will just throw out there, whether we want to engage them or not. Who do I project my shadow onto? And what does that reveal about me? and what might God be trying to teach me or us through the enemy? How can I or we resist evil without being spiritually deformed by it? In a way, I don't think that directly answers Reverend's question, but I hope, we can start to move. Yeah. We can open it up. Would Reverend Floyd, you want to jump back in?
Oh, no, I meant to lower my hand. I apologize.
Oh, no worries. No worries. I think,
Um,
Judith, you've had your hand up since the last session. Would you like to jump in?
Oh, no, I'm just listening. Like I said, this is my first time, but I have been following. I think it's Executive Director Ariel Gold and and just been following you all's great work. So I just want to listen. But I couldn't resist that question because the other gentleman started talking about this philosophy and the science of nonviolence and how that's going to save the planet. And that's just a very powerful statement. So I'll just listen.
Thank you, Reverend. You're more than welcome. We appreciate your insight and questions. I was actually asking Judith. I see you've had your. Would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I think we had a really good opportunity in my county, Brevard County, the day before King's Day. Our sheriff on nationwide television told us if anyone got out of hand, he would kill us. Those were his exact words. And he looked like a caricature of Florida man, like he should be alligator wrestling or something. I mean, it was just so in your face. And I have to give it to the organizers because they just responded in such a heartfelt way to the people that were going to protest the next day. They said, listen, that's a Klan tactic, to really get you angry, and then you do something and then we put you in jail, right? So if you're really angry, stay home. If you can come to this event with peace and love and be the action you want to see in the world, we'll accomplish a lot. And so more people showed up, I think, than would have. There were like 3,000 people in this little tiny beach town of Cocoa Beach, right? And the signs were really positive. They were sending out thick not on quotes and Gandhi quotes and, trying to get people to focus on the positive, focus on the positive. And so it was, I think, really successful for us because it brought together people that don't usually agree, and it was a focus on just let go of the anger. What can we all do together? So I felt like it was really a big accomplishment. There were thousands of people in all little towns in our county. I don't even know if would have shown up if he hadn't have done that,
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to say is I have to admit that I have been feeling like a lot of with the bombing of Iran, not unhappy that they bombed back. Do you know what I mean? Especially that they weren't bombing civilians, that they were bombing strategic sites. And I think last time I said to you, is defending yourself nonviolence, and so I struggle with that because I don't think Iran would be on the map if they didn't, they'd be just like Lebanon and Syria and Iraq and everything else, so
Interesting.
I've been praying for them. Yeah.
I share your concern and question and struggle.
Yeah.
I also really love all the birds in your background, by the way, Judith. Those are really amazing.
Thank you.
I think we have Dr. Amina and Alice. I don't know who was first or if you want to fight for who. Yeah, I'm just kidding.
Well, I just want to comment on this question of training, which seems to me so essential, and what the pastor who was driving raised the question about our King's Day gathering in Warwick, New York, where, I mean, it's a small town northwest of 60 miles northwest of New York City in the lower Hudson Valley. And 1,000 people turned out and lined the streets, and 2 lanes of cars going one in each direction, responding as well, most of them quite positively to this outpouring. Does it make a difference? And what I arrived rather late to it. And it was apparently word had gone out in the group that at 11:30 we would disperse. That was the arrangement with the village. At 11:30, somebody beat a drum and people immediately dispersed. The role of discipline in a crowd, and it was just clear to me that something more was going on than other protests I've been to. And I've been playing the harp of, shouldn't we be training ourselves in nonviolence? With my Quaker meeting, we say we are for, and I think there's some confusion between, are we pacifists or are we nonviolent activists? So that really spoke to me at week's work. And then later that afternoon, late evening of the evening, my granddaughter called me. She's out in Minneapolis going to college. She's just turning 21. And she said she had been to the demonstration in St. Paul, that the one in Minneapolis had been canceled because of the tragic events that took place that day. And that she had been studying nonviolence and reading and listening to things about it. And she went by herself to St. Paul. So that this young person is going about this in a systematic way gives me hope. And how do we amplify that question of how to remove and show these examples?
Thank you, Alice. Thank you for sharing. Is it Dr. Amina? Would you like to jump in?
So this is my first time also. So
We cannot hear you well, my dear. Your voice is very low.
It is very low, but can you hear me better? I need a new computer. How about that?
It's a bit better.
Okay. It's probably also dangerous for me to speak without having spoken before, but I wanted to put a Black, queer, cisgender female voice into the space. I'm also an ordained minister of almost 40 years. And one of the things that I've been doing in order to show up non-violently, personally, individually, is some self-care. And I've been reading a book by Dr. Shaniqua Walker Barnes. It's entitled Sacred Self-Care. And this morning, the practice was to ask yourself the question, what personal and family stories of trauma, violence, and abuse does your body tell? My mother lived to be 104. She transitioned a couple of years ago. And all of my life, I heard the story that Shaniqua Barnes said, you don't have to tell all the details. So I'm not going to do that, other than just to say that my great-grandfather was coming from a prayer meeting, and 2 rings of Ku Klux Klan surrounded his home when he was coming from a prayer meeting. And so I have that knowledge, and it rests in my bones, right? And so it's something that shows up, and it's where my passion for activism comes from. However, to continually, I get the question very much and appreciated the question that the Reverend from South Carolina asked, because that's what really provoked me even to speak. Because I find that the shadow side, you know, that I have made friends with, you know, thinks about how Frederick Douglass said that, you know, you got to agitate. And even though you said that perhaps these tactics would not have worked in the past, passivity was really not the story of my ancestors. It really was not the story. You know, the violent taketh the kingdom by force. And that doesn't necessarily mean, some would say, that there's violence that needs to happen. And also with your wonderful optimism of how, you know, these protests have been nonviolent. And I do pray, that might continue. But if perchance it does not happen, does that mean that we fail? And does that really mean that the others have failed as well? And those are just questions that I have, because I don't have answers. I'm like the Reverend. I just have question after question after question. And so I'm looking for someone smarter than me to shed the light on, that we all might be able to continue to walk in that light. Because sometimes I think we get glimpses of it, or we move away, and that's when we're in the shadows. But the shadow is our friend. So I'm going to stop right there. I hope I've been heard. You know, I've been having this problem with my computer. May God bless me with it. But so thankful for this forum that you're having right now. God bless everyone.
Thank you, Reverend. Thank you very much. God bless you too. Susan, did you want to jump in?
Yes, with a reflection on chapter 9, the gifts of the enemy. And it seems that Walter Wink is suggesting that enemies, even oppressors, can be seen as gifts in that they reveal aspects of ourselves in our situation, and in this case, the Palestinians, aspects of the Palestinian people and their situation that they might not otherwise recognize, and which also eventually would lead to personal transformation and hopefully national liberation and a greater just world for all. And in that regard, the Palestinian people are indeed iconic, the iconic poster child, if you will, of all oppressed peoples throughout the world. And there's a chant, you know, in the millions, in the billions, we are all Palestinians. Because what's happening to the Palestinian people, those dynamics of empire are present in Sudan, in the Congo, all over the world, Central and South America, we at our own border, even here in the United States, as we see the prison industrial complex and the $1 trillion Pentagon budget now being turned with the rifles, barrels of rifles being turned now on white people. So the chicken has come home to roost, in the words of the Reverend of Malcolm X, rather. But also the gifts of the Palestinian people. I mean, we've known for 77 years about the Samud, the persistence and the endurance of the Palestinian people. But now the Palestinian people, in all of their suffering, it has been remarked that as time passes since October 7th, the Israeli public is actually getting more incensed and more enraged. And polls are showing that the Israeli population writ large is actually getting more angry and into the idea of the total annihilation of the Palestinian people. Not all of them, of course, but a majority, and a growing majority, while the Palestinian people themselves are just holding this even keel for the most part, waiting for a ceasefire, asking, for a two-state solution, asking for or a resolution, asking for an end to the violence, but they're not expressing that rage and hatred that even what is happening to them, most of the Palestinians are just expressing a will to live and a desire for food, water, and peace. And so in this regard, similar to what was mentioned before by Reverend Fahad about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and Gandhi, I mean, nonviolence, being proponents of nonviolence is the greatest threat to the empire, because it is through violence that they divide and conquer. And so the Palestinian people now are loved iconically because of their peaceful and beautiful ways. And that is a gift in this horrible moment.
The gift of the enemy. Reverend Fahad, would you like to jump in?
Yeah. The thing that we really always need to remember and deal with is the context, number one, and two, the perception and the power of the media. That's say, I'm thinking about, imagine I am the survivor of the first Nakba. That means in 1948-49, according Professor Ellen Pappy, the new state of Israel destroyed 530 villages and towns and exiled by force Palestinians, between 750 to 1 million Palestinians out, who are still refugees. And the only people that stayed in the Palestinian state, in the new state of Israel, will be 155,000. So my parents will be one of the 155,000. So from 1948 to 1966, the new state of Israel created 63 laws to control our lives, movement, education, health, labor, everything under the sun. The question I'm raising, when you and I are in the ditch and a soldier with a gun over us, the definition of the world have been that I am a Palestinian in the ditch, I am violent, but the one that holding the gun over my head is peaceful. That's the power of communication. And so as I think about our situation, imagine from 1948 until I came to the U.S., 66, to leave my village and go 5 miles to another town, I needed to go to the Israeli military governor and get a permit. And if I'm found without a permit, I go to court and I go to jail. So I'm thinking loud, after 1967, the Israeli military clutches over our neck went toward Gaza and the West Bank. So you tell an American that you are a Palestinian Christian from Bethlehem, cannot go to Jerusalem without a permit, which is 7 miles, they don't believe. Where you are from Atlanta or from New York, you can go and walk every place you want without a permit. So I think we need to do a lot of definition to help people understand what is going on. A person in the West Bank today cannot go to their field without a permit, cannot go to another town to a hospital without a permit. So as a tourist, you go and come back. But unless you understand the context, there is a vacuum. So I think people who are dealing with violence and nonviolence, we need to explain the context of what is going on first. And that's very important.
Thank you very much, Reverend Fahad. In the purposes of time, I'm just going to jump to chapter 10, if that's okay with folks. So chapter 10 is, the last chapters, of course, chapter 11, the epilogue, but, chapter 10 is the last chapter in that sense. And the title is Prayer and the Powers. There's a few main points, that are are highlighted that tie into, much of what we're talking about in this session, and also our previous sessions, but also some new ones. Okay, so Wink highlights this notion of prayer, prayer as engagement with the powers. So prayer for Wink is not like an escape from the world, but a direct engagement with the powers, those spiritual and institutional forces of life and death. And it's through prayer we challenge, we influence, and realign these powers according to the divine justice. Wink is, we should mention before this session closes again, he's an expert of the New Testament, and he draws from Paul's writings, especially in Ephesians, presenting prayer as cosmic activism. Okay, so prayer as a way of participating in the struggle between good and evil at the level of spiritual reality, in prayer presenting a kind of battlefield where love confronts the domination system and a conscious hope refuses despair. Another big thing in this chapter is this kind of this mystery of intercession. There's a way that we don't really understand how prayer works, but Wink emphasizes that it does work. It's just not in this hyper mechanical, let's say rationalist, anthropocentric way. It's actually very relational amongst all creatures. So this intercession that may come from the Creator is not about changing God's mind, but attempting to align ourselves more with God's purposes and opening channels, for divine action in the world. And in this way, divine, prayer and nonviolence are interlinked, because prayer resists the powers at the spiritual root, refusing to accept their authority as ultimate. God is the only ultimate. And prayer in that way at the rational level disrupts the logic of violence, reminding us and the world that, another world is possible. And maybe in a way similar to how I shared this chapter, of the Quran in the beginning of this session, prayer operates as a form of sustenance for our activism. So for those who confront injustice, prayer is essential, not just for guidance, but for spiritual survival. We can't really challenge ourselves horizontally if we don't maintain that vertical connection. We risk very serious forms of burnout, bitterness, or being consumed by the very powers that we resist.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll just share a few last things from chapter 11 as well, so that we can, bring these last two things together and to bring the work of the powers that be all together. In the epilogue, Wink highlights his all of his arguments as a new way of seeing the world, as a transformed worldview, and he calls upon readers of his text to live in what he describes as God's domination-free order, which for him as a Christian is rooted in Jesus's teaching and example. He calls us to live in tension or within tension. We must live in the tension between the old order, you know. We all come from some kind of cocoon, and then somehow this phoenix appears, you know, and it's an inbreaking of God's reign. So,
Amen.
Another big thing is the powers are not evil in themselves. You know, even the Pharaoh, I mean, at least in the Quran, I know, was given a chance to transform. You know, and Moses was explicitly told, you know, اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى. Go to Pharaoh to challenge him because he has transgressed. And there's funny theories, you know, some think that he might have converted to Islam before dying. We won't get into that. Okay. So so we have to redeem and not just destroy, you know, institutions. And another big theme to close things out is hope as revolutionary, but it's not just, you know, it's a hope that's disciplined. You know, it's a disciplined choice for Wink. Reverend Dr. Brother Cornel West, I think, describes this as a hope on a tightrope. Okay, you know, we can't really say optimism, but you know, we got this hope, something that's keeping us going because we make a choice to keep going in defiance of despair and cynicism. And ultimately, Wink's book is an invitation, you know, to all of us for faith-based activism from whatever paths that we come from. So, yeah, folks, I mean, that's just a bit of a wrap-up of the last two chapters. We can, yeah, what's come out for you in these last two chapters? Or other things you may want to share, you know, as we're closing out this last session.
I would like to say that Walter would always say that it's nonviolent activism, not just nonviolent. He puts the word activism with it. The other thing is the myth of redemptive violence, which he emphasized over and over and over. And that history belongs to the intercessors when we were talking about prayer. That was one of his themes and something he totally believed in.
We see you, Dr. Wink.
I would like to share something. So something that Susan was sharing and then the Reverend was sharing reminded me of the Martin Luther King's approach when he was in the Birmingham jail and he wrote the letter. And in the letter, he found common ground to point out to the religious community their hypocrisy and the other things, you know, that they were doing. And when Susan was talking about the Palestinian people basically following all the rules, you know, to me that just highlights the hypocrisy with all the powers that be that are causing these folks to suffer. And so, yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Michelle. We got Tandy jumping.
Thank you. Good to see you. and good to be with you all. I think I really like, June, what you said, the idea that history belongs to the intercessors. And one of the quotes that I shared in the chat, the future belongs to whoever can envision a new and desirable possibility. It feels like there's something about, I think, that's like inherent to intercession, which requires some sort of vision for this new future. And I feel like it feels like that vision for something different is so necessary in our activism and in our social movements, and that having that vision becomes a kind of orienting anchor, I think, for how we move. And even though the strategies and tactics might be the same, I think it somehow changes the way that we're oriented, and even plays into this idea of rehearsal that came out a lot in these chapters. But it allows our action and our activism to be a kind of rehearsal of this new future that we're dreaming of creating together.
Yeah, I will say that prayer is so essential that can change things. And I think, people of faith in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, if we use the power of prayer, I believe things can change. And of course, prayer needs feet and eyes and hands and so forth. And we forget to challenge people to pray. And this is, I think at this time, we need to focus on the power of prayer more than ever before. And as I think about I like I usually say to Christians, I wish each one of us can take 5 minutes, 5 times a day, like the sisters and brother in Islam, and pray. Just 5 minutes, 5 times. You never know what can happen to you, number one. Number two, this last Passover, I was the guest of Dr. Elise Cohen, and the Jewish Voice for Peace, Haggadah about going out of Egypt and so forth. Everything in that Haggadah was mentioning there's no freedom without the Palestinian freedom and so forth. So I would like, if you are interested, for Ariel to email you that Haggadah. I think it's more liberating than any Christians I ever heard with that, the importance of dealing with the Passover, but we cannot have a Passover unless we liberate the Palestinians. It was uplifting to me, number one, and number two, that was my birthday, so it was a great celebration.
Thank you, Reverend Fahad. Shukran. I mean, just jump, Susan and Rosina, please.
I want to just add that Reverend Fahad Abu Akal is on the National Council of the Fellowship of Reconciliation, and we are so deeply honored that he is among us, and he gives us great wisdom and guidance and keeps us on the straight path always. And I want to say something else as we were closing this session or coming to the end of this session regarding the powers that be. And you know, we started back in the beginning with the first session, and there was talk about how Walter Wink, his perspective on empires was that the powers were not necessarily inherently evil, but that they could have the potential both good and evil. And in this regard, I want to just finish with something of a little bit of hope. I'm putting in the chat now. There are 20 powers known as, which are member states of the UN countries known as the Hague Group. And this block of countries has, since the beginning of the year, been working to stop Israel with their parliaments, you know, not allowing weapons to go through their ports, you know, having arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant if they come by, and taking other means in their own respective countries, so that that the international law, like the International Court of Justice advisory ruling, or the September 18th UN General Assembly resolution of 2024 that was so powerful and overarching and sweeping in its rights, a condemnation of the occupation and the genocide, etc., and demanding that 1 year from that date, which means September 18th, 2025, that Israel has to be out of the occupied Palestinian territories. That's international law by September 28th. So next week, next Tuesday and Wednesday, the Hague Group, which started with about 9 countries and now has grown to 20 countries in Europe and the Global South, led by South Africa and led by Colombia, are convening in Bogota, Colombia, next Tuesday and Wednesday for an emergency session on the situation in Gaza. And we can hope and we can pray that these countries will use their power as a bloc in the United Nations General Assembly to call for the invocation of United Nations General Assembly Resolution 377, Uniting for Peace Resolution of 1950, which can give the General Assembly the power to take away power from the Security Council if the Security Council is failing.
Amen.
Amen. The General Assembly created the Security Council. It does have a mechanism to take power over it when the Security Council is failing. So as we are all so much in pain, and I know that Iskander came into this meeting and I saw it on his face and in his body language immediately, that he is suffering as we're all suffering. Let us hold those 20 countries meeting in Bogota Tuesday and Wednesday, and all of their allies in prayer. And may those numbers, which were 9 countries, now 20, may they become 193 countries. And let's pray. Let's pray.
Yes. Yes, inshallah. Inshallah. God
Inshallah.
willing.
Yes.
It's wonderful news. Thank you so much for sharing the good news with us, Susan. You know, and there's that ayah in Surah Yasin, you know, Bashir, share the good news. We have to do that too. And for me, folks, I mean, with what happened with the ICJ case and now with the Hague Group, this was the dream of Malcolm X. I don't know if folks, you know, towards the end of his life, he wanted to take the American government to the United Nations for its human rights abuses against Black people. You know, so let us also pray that we get the victory on that side, and let's go after Trump. Let's go after everyone else who's been killing all of us. You know, that's my hope, that all of these tyrants and oppressors can be held to account. Because everything is so deeply interconnected and we all got to get free. So I don't know if I can just wrap up by saying thank you to you all. It has been an absolute pleasure to have led and co-led this book club. I have learned so much from you all, from reading this work. Please forgive me for my shortcomings. Please forgive me when I have erred or, potentially offended or pissed any of you off. So thank you all. A big thank you to, the Fellowship of Reconciliation, to June Wink, to the soul and the spirit of Walter Wink. It's been a pleasure, folks, and I wish you all well. I don't know if there's anything else that needs to be shared by June or Susan or Ariel, but yeah, take care.
I would like to share one thing, and that is to ask you, Islander, how what we've been talking about coming out of Walter's book is different from your own studies as a theological scholar. Is it different or is it the same? What are the differences? I don't want to open a big another hour, but I just had that question in the beginning and I still have it at the end.
Sure. I mean, with all respect to the Christian audience, we don't believe in the Trinity. So we can start there as an abstract form of difference. Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking through that question, June. I learned a lot in reading his work and also being forced to reflect in relation to the Islamic tradition on the question of nonviolence. So that's still developing for me. Yeah.
May I say one thing?
Yeah.
Would you please read The Human Being? That book, that will take away some of that question that you brought up about the Trinity.
Oh, okay. Oh, is it by Walter as well?
By Walter Wink.
Ah, okay.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you so much. There's always one or two more questions, but we
Just to clarify, June, for those who don't know, even though Muslims don't believe in the Trinity, we believe that Jesus was the only human that was born or most perfect, without sin. That even in the Quran, there's a chapter about how Prophet Muhammad committed a sin, but we revere Jesus, but not as a God, but as the most noble and esteemed of prophets, and his mother Mary, there's a whole chapter devoted to her. So
okay, I got it.
Yeah, so there's a lot of commonality, certainly.
Anything else from FOR side, Susan?
Ariel, would you like to have any closing words? I think Ariel might have gotten in her car.
Sorry. Yes, I had to.
Great.
I apologize. I had to move to the car. So I apologize for not being on camera, but I want to give a really a big thanks to Iskander for hosting this thoughtful and beautiful workshop. And to June for all that you bring, June, to the Fellowship of Reconciliation in Walter, and your legacy as a woman, and together with Walter as partners. And I'll say personally that I've been struggling with stuff centered around womenness lately, and I think a lot to you, and the beauty and strength and clarity that you carry, June. So I want to thank you for that, and I want to thank Susan for your thoughtful and diligent facilitation and planning of this whole program. Thank you to everybody for attending, and in the coming weeks, give us a little time because Susan's taking vacation and we all need rest, right? Especially in times of grief. But in the coming weeks, we will send you a compilation of these videos and kind of a curation, maybe some short videos of that in time as well. So thank you to everyone. It's been such a pleasure to be here. And along with what Reverend Abuakal said, that, you know, there are so many aspects to prayer and how prayer is helpful both to ourselves and to work that embark on in this world. And I'll add, I've recently returned from Palestine and Israel, where I was caught there during the Israel-Iran war.
And Susan, we need, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Reverend, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We need this group to stay in tune because we discovered as a council, there's nothing going on in the teaching of nonviolence, and there's a possibility we'll do webinar in the fall and next year. So we want you to spread the word.
Yes, are you referring to the training in nonviolent direct action, Reverend Fahed?
Correct.
Yes, FOR is very excited that we are working with our chapters and with Pocky Wieland of Code Pink and Lisa Fithian, who is a nonviolent direct action trainer extraordinaire, internationally known, training, for example, people on the Gaza Freedom Flotillas how to non-violently defend themselves from Israeli paratroopers, etc. But we are going to start with an online two-part training, hopefully the end of this summer. Please stay tuned. One will be the first part theoretical, second part online practical. I know that's an oxymoron, but whatever chapters or areas. So for example, Reverend Floyd, if you can get together a group in North Carolina, whatever chapters or areas show an interest in enough numbers, then we would come and have in-person training. So thank you for plugging that.
Can you still hear me?
Yes, you left. We lost you.
I had a feeling I did. Yes, I think it's the Palisades Parkway dips. But I'll end by just saying, so I left Palestine, Israel after being, you know, in the most horrific of circumstances in a bomb shelter, and you know, amid the bombings of hospitals and residential buildings in Iran and in Israel and in the West Bank and of course in Gaza and all of that. And I left there with hope. I left there with hope, and it's not hope that we're going to end this horrible state of war tomorrow, but it's, I think, a renewed faith and deep hope, really hopeful for the humanity of all of us, and a reiteration to me that all of us, you know, want the same thing and come from the same place of love and humanness, the humanness that Walter spoke about. And in the midst of that violence, I feel a renewed sense of hope that we indeed will get there. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Ariel.
Thank you so much, Ariel. And thank you, Iskander. Thank you, Reverend Fahed. Thank you, each and every one of you. Thank you, June, who's made this possible. Thank you, Walter. Thank you, all of our dear friends here. It really seems so sad to leave today as we've shared something and also found strength in each other. So let's find ways to stay together and to keep our prayer and our activism alive. And most of all, thank you so much, Iskander. You are a blessing. May Allah protect you and strengthen you and sustain you in your work. And God bless you and all of the Palestinian people.